Did you know that over 60% of people stay emotionally attached to someone who no longer reciprocates their feelings? That means more than half of us are out here loving people who couldn't even text back on time. But let's get real. Walking away isn't the hard part. Detaching your heart from someone who doesn't care, that's where it hurts. Especially when you loved them deeply, when you gave them all of you, when you held on to potential instead of reality. You keep thinking, maybe they'll change. You replay the memories. You try to make sense of what happened. You blame yourself for loving too hard, when in truth you were just hoping they'd finally love you the way you deserve. But here's the truth. Loving someone who doesn't care slowly erodes your self-worth. It keeps you in emotional debt. Constantly giving, never receiving. So in this video, we're not just going to talk about moving on. We're going to walk through the internal shifts you need to finally set yourself free. Part 1. Accept that closure won't come from them. Keep checking your phone. One last message. One more call. A sign that they cared, that maybe they're sorry, that they regret how they treated you, or at least realize what they lost. But it doesn't come. And deep down, you already know. It never will. You tell yourself you just need closure. Just one honest conversation, one explanation to help you move on. But the longer you wait for it from them, the longer you stay stuck. You're holding your healing hostage, waiting for answers from someone who was never honest to begin with. The truth? People who don't care enough to stay rarely care enough to give closure. They leave you with silence, half-truths, and emotional messes you're expected to clean up alone. Not because you weren't worthy of an explanation, but because they never had the emotional depth to offer one. And that hurts. Because closure feels like the one thing that would make this easier. But the irony is, closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you deciding you've had enough. That your peace matters more than waiting for someone else to validate your pain. So maybe they ghosted you. Maybe they gave you mixed signals or strung you along while never choosing you fully. And now you're left with fragments, memories that don't add up, feelings that still burn, and a silence that feels louder than anything they ever said. You replay everything, hoping to find a different ending. You imagine the conversation where they finally open up, where they say all the things you needed to hear. But that moment isn't coming, and the longer you live in that imaginary version of them, the longer you delay your freedom. Closure is not a shared event, it's a choice, a moment of truth where you finally stop needing their permission to move on. It's saying, I don't need your apology to know I deserved better. I don't need your explanation to start healing. I'm done waiting. I'm done chasing. I'm done giving my energy to someone who never knew what to do with it. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care about yourself more now. You start creating closure the moment you stop expecting it to come wrapped in a text or a conversation or a dramatic reconciliation. Real closure sounds like silence, like deleting the number, not checking their social, letting the questions stay unanswered. Like choosing to live without knowing why, because peace is better than clarity when clarity never comes. And yeah, it's uncomfortable. You'll have to live with loose ends. You'll have to let go of the fantasy of the perfect goodbye. But you'll also start breathing again, sleeping again, smiling without wondering if they'll ever notice. Because when someone doesn't care enough to give you closure, it's not a reflection of your value. It's proof of their emotional limitation. And healing means you stop trying to fix what broke you. You let it break, and then you rise anyway. So here it is. You don't need them to make peace with the past. You just need to make peace with the truth. They're not coming back. They're not going to fix it. And they were never the closure you needed. You are. Part 2. Stop romanticizing what never was. You keep telling yourself it was special, that what you had was rare, deep, maybe even once in a lifetime. You replay the good moments like a highlight reel. The laughs, the intimacy, the way they used to look at you. You hold on to those flashes of warmth as proof that it meant something, that it was real. But here's the hard truth. You're not grieving the relationship. You're grieving the version of it you created in your mind. You've built a story around them, around what you thought they were, what they could have been if they had just tried a little harder, if they'd healed, if the timing had been right. But the version you're still in love with isn't the version that actually showed up for you. They hurt you. They pulled away. They made you feel small or ignored or never quite enough. But your mind keeps skipping past that. It edits out the disrespect, the indifference, the loneliness you felt even when you were right next to them. Because it's easier to remember the potential than to accept the reality. You tell yourself things like, they're just scared of love, or they push me away because they care too much. No. If someone cares, they show up. They communicate. They don't confuse you. They don't make you question your worth. Romanticizing what you had is just another way of staying emotionally attached. It's your heart's way of avoiding the truth, that maybe they were never capable of loving you the way you needed. That maybe you filled in the blanks with your own hope, your own depth, your own loyalty. You were loyal to an idea, not to the actual experience. Because if you're honest, the relationship wasn't healthy. It wasn't mutual. You kept giving, and they kept taking. You kept justifying red flags because you didn't want to start over. You clung to crumbs and convinced yourself it was a feast, and maybe they weren't a bad person. Maybe they had good moments, but good moments don't erase the damage. Love isn't proven in bursts of charm. It's proven in consistency, in effort, in the quiet, unglamorous ways someone chooses you, again and again. So now, every time, your mind tries to pull you back into the fantasy. Interrupt it. Don't fight the memory, just tell the whole story. Not just the date night or the way they kissed your forehead, but the way they disappeared when you needed them. The way you begged for clarity and got silence. The way they made you feel like loving them was something you had to earn. You deserve to let go of the version of them you made up. The one you held on to because it was easier than admitting it wasn't what you thought. And when you stop romanticizing it, you'll see it for what it was. Not a deep love, but a deep longing. A connection that lived more in your heart than in reality. And that's okay. That's human. But now it's time to stop replaying the illusion and start reclaiming your truth. Because healing doesn't begin when you forget them. It begins when you see them clearly, not as who you hoped they'd become, but as who they actually were. And that version? The one who couldn't love you back? You don't need them anymore. You need you. Part 3. Cut off false hope. Completely, somewhere deep down, you're still holding on. Not to the person maybe, but to the idea that one day they'll realize what they lost. That they'll show up, changed. That the love you gave will finally hit them and they'll come back with an apology, with clarity, with everything you needed but never got. That hope, it's what's keeping you stuck. False hope is one of the most dangerous attachments you can have after a breakup, especially when the person didn't care enough to stay, or worse, made you feel like love was something you had to fight for, alone. But your mind plays tricks. It keeps whispering. Maybe they'll grow. Maybe they'll miss me. Maybe this silence is temporary. You start looking for signs. You think about what they're thinking. You wonder if they're watching your stories, if that song they posted was about you, if their late-night texts meant they still care. You convince yourself there's meaning in the mixed signals, even if deep down you know better. But false. Hope doesn't just delay healing, it blocks it. Because every time you entertain the possibility of them coming back, you pause your life. You stay emotionally unavailable to real love. You compare everyone new to someone who couldn't even choose you properly. You stay tied to a chapter that's already over. rereading the same lines hoping the ending will magically change. Hope is powerful, but only when it's pointed at the truth. And the truth is, if someone wanted to be with you, they would be. If they saw your worth, you wouldn't be questioning it. If they were capable of the kind of love you deserve, you'd feel secure, not anxious, not confused, not waiting for a text that never comes. So it's time to be honest with yourself. Every time you think about the what-ifs, ask, is this helping me move forward or keeping me trapped? Every time you replay a memory, remind yourself how it really felt. Not just the highs, but the lows, the inconsistency, the loneliness of loving someone who couldn't love you fully back. Letting go of false hope doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care about yourself more. You draw the line not because you hate them, but because you love your peace. Because you finally understand that your heart deserves to be held gently, not played with. That your time is valuable. That your energy is not a free resource for someone who treats you like an option. Cutting off false hope means doing the hard things. Deleting the thread, blocking their number, stopping yourself from checking their social. Not because you're bitter, but because you're choosing to heal without needing their permission or presence. It's creating closure with your actions. Telling your heart, I know you still care, I know you miss them, but we're not going backward. We're not waiting anymore, and it'll hurt. At first it'll feel like you're giving up, but you're not. You're letting go of a fantasy, of a half-love, of a future that was never real to begin with. Because here's the thing, you can't fully move on while still leaving the door cracked open for them to return. Healing requires you to close it, to lock it, to walk away, not in anger, but in self-respect. They had their chance. Now it's your turn to choose you, to free yourself, and to finally let real love find you without needing to fight for the bare minimum. Part 4. Reconnect with your identity. Outside the relationship, you forget who you were before them. It's strange how a relationship, especially one that hurt, can erase so much of you. You stop seeing yourself as a whole person and instead become an extension of them, their moods, their approval, their presence. And when it ends, it's not just the person you miss. It's who you were with them. Or more accurately, who you thought you had to be to keep them. That's why this step is crucial. Reconnecting with your identity outside the relationship isn't just about moving on. It's about reclaiming yourself. Because when you love someone who doesn't care, you slowly start to abandon parts of yourself just to feel noticed. You tone yourself down. You become easygoing when things upset you. You accept less and call it loyalty. And in the process, your identity gets wrapped up in proving your worth to someone who was never trying to see it. So now, without them, who are you? It's a question that might scare you, because you've spent so long adjusting your shape to fit theirs, that now you feel like an outline. But this is the part where you stop shrinking. This is where you begin. It starts small. Remember the things you used to love, the music you listened to before every song reminded you of them, the clothes you wore because you liked them, not because you hoped they'd notice, the friends you stopped texting back, the dreams you shelved because someone once made you feel like they were too big. This is where you take inventory of everything you lost while trying to hold on to someone else. And you don't do it to feel guilty. You do it to take your power back. Because loving someone who didn't care doesn't mean you're broken. It means you cared deeply. It means you're capable of loving hard. But now, it's time to love yourself that same way. To pour that energy back into you. To realize that your value was never dependent on being chosen. You were always enough. You just forgot for a while. You might feel a void right now, like something's missing. That's normal. But what's missing isn't them. What's missing is you. And the only way to fill that void is not by chasing someone to come back. It's by returning to yourself. by getting comfortable being alone, by showing up for yourself in small ways every day, cooking for yourself, sitting with your thoughts, spending time in your own company without needing it to be validated. You'll start to realize something beautiful. You were never incomplete, just distracted from your wholeness. And the more you reconnect with yourself, the less appealing that old love will feel. Not because the pain disappears overnight, but because you'll slowly start to see how much you were giving compared to how little you were receiving. Eventually, the question won't be, why didn't they care? It'll be, why was I so willing to lose myself for someone who never saw me fully? And that's when you know you're healing. When their silence no longer makes you question your worth. When you can look back without wanting to go back. When you finally see yourself, clearly, powerfully, not through their eyes, but your own. That's the shift. That's the freedom. Part 5. Replace emotional fantasy. With harsh truth, it's wild how the mind can turn a cold memory into something warm. How we rewrite the past to protect the feelings we don't want to face. You think about the good times, the way they smiled at you that one night, the texts that made your heart race, the plans you almost made together. But what you're really holding on to isn't reality. It's the fantasy. And that fantasy is killing your peace. Because deep down, you know how it really felt. You know the uncertainty, the waiting, the confusion. You remember the silence when you needed answers, the way they pulled you in just enough to keep you hoping, but never fully. You knew even back then that something wasn't right, but the idea of them felt better than the truth of them. That's what makes it so hard to let go. You're not just grieving a person, you're grieving a story you told yourself. One where they'd eventually wake up and realize your worth. One where love would conquer the distance. One where their mixed signals meant something deeper. But here's the shift. If you want to stop loving someone who doesn't care, you have to stop lying to yourself. You have to stop pretending that what you felt was mutual, that their inconsistency was just fear, that their lack of effort was something you could fix if you just loved them better. It wasn't. They weren't confused. They weren't broken. They just didn't care the way you did. And no amount of love from your side could make up for what they didn't want to give. Facing that hurts like hell. It shatters the illusion. It leaves you raw and angry and heartbroken. But it's real. And real is the only place healing starts. You don't need closure from them. You need truth from yourself. Brutal, honest, healing truth. The kind that strips away every romantic excuse you've made for their behavior. The kind that stops letting your heart write fantasy stories about someone who never showed up when it counted. You have to be the one to say, they weren't good for me. Even if you love them, even if you still do, because love isn't enough if it's one-sided. It isn't enough if you have to abandon yourself to keep it alive. The truth isn't always beautiful, but it is freeing. When you stop chasing what could have been and start accepting what was, you give yourself the chance to breathe again. You stop spinning in circles trying to decode someone who left you guessing. You stop measuring your worth by their inability to show up. And slowly, piece by piece, you begin to reclaim your reality. You start seeing the red flags you once called passion. You remember the times you cried more than you laughed. You feel the weight of what you carried alone, and you finally put it down. Replacing fantasy with truth doesn't erase the pain, but it puts you back in control. It reminds you that love isn't supposed to confuse you. It's not supposed to make you question if you matter. Love should feel safe, solid, mutual. Anything less isn't love. It's longing. And you deserve more than longing. You deserve presence, effort, clarity. You deserve someone who doesn't just want you. When it's convenient, someone who doesn't make you guess. So let the fantasy die. Let the version of them you built in your mind fade away. And in that space, build something new. Not with them, but with yourself. Something grounded. something true, something real. Because reality, no matter how painful, is always the beginning of real peace.